Nobody warns people about the emotionally detached one. And that is the most dangerous oversight society keeps making. There are warnings for every other type. Watch out for the angry one, the manipulative one, the one who loves too hard and burns everything down when it falls apart, the one who needs the spotlight so desperately they'll sabotage anyone standing in it. Those people come with signals, raised voices, mood swings, emotional outbursts, desperation leaking through every interaction. Easy to read, easy to track, easy to prepare for. But the emotionally detached loner? No signals, no outbursts, no desperation, just stillness. And society looks at that stillness and makes its first mistake. It assumes stillness means empty. It assumes that someone who doesn't react much, doesn't need much, doesn't chase much, must not feel much, must not be capable of much. And that assumption is not just wrong. It is the kind of wrong that costs people everything. Because what society refuses to understand about the emotionally detached loner is this. The detachment is not absence. It is control. Complete, deliberate, absolute control over what gets in and what gets out. And a person who has mastered that level of emotional control, in a world where everyone else is completely at the mercy of their feelings, is operating on a different level entirely. Not louder, not more aggressive, not more visible, just fundamentally differently built, and the room has no idea. Reason 1. Here is the thing about the emotionally detached loner that breaks people when they finally understand it. The detachment was never about them. It was never a response to something they did or didn't do. It was never something that could have been avoided if they had just been better, tried harder, shown up differently. The emotionally detached loner was simply never attached. Not in the way most people build attachment. Not in the way that makes someone's mood dependent on whether a text gets replied to. Not in the way that makes someone need the relationship to be a certain thing to feel okay about themselves. The detached loner showed up, was present, was genuine in the moments that were genuine. But underneath all of it, was fine either way. And here is why that is the most destabilizing thing a person can discover about someone they thought they were close to. Think about what that actually does to someone. They texted first every time, made the plans every time, remembered the details, the birthday, the thing the detached loner mentioned once 6 months ago, the preference, the story, and the detached loner received all of it, responded, was present, was real in the moments that were real, but never once stayed up at night wondering if the relationship was okay. Never once felt the anxiety of not hearing back for a day. Never once needed the connection to survive the week. And the other person had absolutely no idea, because the detached loner never performed indifference either. Never acted cold, never seemed disinterested, never gave a single clear signal that would have made the truth obvious. Just was there, without needing to be. And one day when the detached loner stopped showing up, the other person was blindsided, because from where they were standing, they had a deep mutual connection with someone who genuinely cared. From where the detached loner was standing, it was just something that existed for a while, and then didn't. And that gap between those two realities is the thing that breaks people open. Not the loss. The realization that arrives 3 weeks after the loss, when the other person is lying awake replaying every memory through a new lens, and noticing for the first time that the detached loner was always present, but never once desperate for the presence. Always warm, but never in a way that needed the warmth back. Always there, but never in a way that required being there. And the question that surfaces, the one with no clean answer, was this ever what I thought it was? That question, not the ending, not the loss. That question is what the emotionally detached loner leaves behind, without trying, without even knowing, just by being exactly what they are. Reason 2. The emotionally detached loner is a vault, and most people have been making deposits into that vault for years without knowing it. Here's the thing about emotional detachment that nobody explains properly. It doesn't mean the detached loner isn't paying attention. It means the detached loner is paying attention without the noise of emotional reaction getting in the way. Most people process information through their feelings first. Someone says something. The listener feels something about it. That feeling colors the memory, distorts it, edits it over time. The emotionally detached loner processes differently. The information goes in clean. No emotional distortion, no editing. No softening of things that were hard to hear. No inflation of things that felt good. Just what was said, what was meant, what it revealed, filed accurately, permanently. And here's what that looks like in real life. Someone is talking to the detached loner casually, comfortably, assuming the detached loner is barely listening because there's no big visible reaction. So they relax. And a relaxed person reveals things. The joke that accidentally shows exactly what they actually think about someone. The small complaint that reveals a resentment they've never directly expressed. The thing mentioned once, quickly, then moved past as if it wasn't said. The emotionally detached loner catches all of it, without reacting, without acknowledging, without giving any signal that it landed anywhere. Weeks pass, months sometimes, and then the moment arrives where one of those filed pieces of information becomes relevant. And the detached loner uses it, calmly, precisely. And the silence that follows. When someone realizes the detached loner remembered something they said once, casually, in a conversation they thought dissolved into nothing, that silence is the moment they understand. The detached loner was never half listening, was never checked out, was never indifferent, was just quiet enough that they forgot to be careful. Reason 3. The emotionally detached loner's loyalty is one of the most misunderstood things in existence, because from the outside it doesn't look like loyalty at all. No grand gestures, no public declarations, no loud demonstrations of devotion. Just consistent, quiet, completely reliable presence. The detached loner doesn't talk about people behind their backs, because the detached loner barely talks about people at all. Doesn't keep a mental ledger of favors, doesn't remind anyone of what was done for them, doesn't use past support as leverage, just shows up, again and again, without needing it acknowledged, without needing it seen. And here's what that creates in the rare few who actually have it. A standard they don't even know they're being held to, until it's gone. Think about someone who betrayed the emotionally detached loner. Maybe they shared something told to them in confidence. Maybe they chose convenience over loyalty when it mattered. Maybe they simply took the consistent, quiet presence for granted until the presence stopped being there. And at first, the loss doesn't feel that different from any other. But then something starts happening. They get into a new friendship, a new relationship, and things are fine, things are good even. But there's something slightly hollow about it, something that feels a little performed, a little conditional, a little dependent on circumstances staying comfortable. And they can't quite explain it to anyone, because explaining it means admitting what they had, means admitting that the person they dismissed as cold, as detached, as hard to read, was actually the most genuinely loyal person they have ever known. And they threw it away. And everything since has been a lesser version of it. That is what losing the loyalty of a detached loner actually costs. Not a moment of pain, years of comparison, everything measured against something that can't be replaced. Because real loyalty, in a world of transactional connection, does not get replaced. It just gets missed. Quietly, permanently, for a very long time. Reason 4. You need to understand something about emotional manipulation. It is everywhere. Not always malicious, not always conscious, but everywhere. The colleague who cries when they get feedback, not because they're devastated, but because tears tend to make the feedback stop. The friend who goes cold and distant the moment you don't do what they want. Not because they're hurt, but because silence is their way of pulling you back in line. The boss who raises his voice in meetings, not because he's angry, but because volume has always worked as a dominance move. The partner who manufactures a crisis every time you start getting independent. Not because they need help, but because crisis keeps you close. These are tools, and they work beautifully. On people who were raised to feel responsible for other people's emotional states. On people who panic when someone is upset with them. On people who would rather absorb blame than sit in uncomfortable conflict. But you are not those people. You have been through enough, felt enough, lost enough, survived enough. That emotional discomfort doesn't hit you the same way it hits them. When someone cries to control you, you feel something. You're not a robot, you feel it. But you don't cave. When someone rages to dominate the room, You don't flinch. When someone gives you the silent treatment, you actually enjoy the silence. And when they realize their tools aren't working, they panic, they escalate, they push harder, try different tactics, bring in backup, go to people around you to build a case, and you watch all of it happen. Calm, still, unmoved, not performing stoicism, actually experiencing it. And that is what they cannot stand. Because their emotional manipulation is not just a tactic, it is how they understand power. And you just demonstrated that their version of power has no hold on you, which means in every interaction, every negotiation, every conflict, you start with the advantage, because you are the one person in the room they genuinely do not know how to handle. Reason 5. Here is a question worth sitting with. How much of what the people around you do is genuinely chosen, and how much is performed? Watch someone at the office. He works hard. When the boss is watching, he's generous and collaborative. In the meeting where everyone can see, he posts about his values online, loudly. But his private behavior tells a different story. He is not a bad person. He's just a person who has completely lost track of the line between who he is and who he performs being, because he has always had an audience. And when you always have an audience, everything becomes a performance. Your work becomes something you do to be seen working. Your generosity becomes something you do to be seen being generous. Your values become something you display, rather than something you live. And the tragedy is, most people don't even know this is happening. They genuinely believe their performance is their personality. Now look at yourself. You have no audience, or you stopped caring about the audience a long time ago, which means everything you do because you actually chose to do it. Your work ethic isn't a show, it exists in the dark, when nobody is watching, when there's no praise coming. Your loyalty isn't performed, it's just there, quietly, for the very few people who actually earned it. Your word means something, because you don't give it to manage someone's feelings. You give it when you mean it. And in a world where almost everything is performance, a real person is almost shockingly rare, and shocking rarity is always worth more than anyone initially priced it at. They undervalued you because they were comparing you to people performing authenticity, and you were just quietly being it. The market corrects eventually. It always does. Here's the bullshit nobody is saying out loud. Society has been running the same tired narrative about the emotionally detached loner for decades. That the detachment is damage, that the inability to perform warmth on demand is some kind of wound that never healed, that the coldness, the distance, the self-sufficiency, the complete lack of need for external validation is something to be fixed, medicated, therapized back into something more comfortable for the people around it. What absolute garbage. The emotionally detached loner is not broken. The emotionally detached loner is precise about who gets access, who gets trust, who gets the version of themselves that most people in that life will never see. While the rest of the world hands out access like it costs nothing, while the rest of the world performs warmth for strangers and calls it connection, while the rest of the world mistakes proximity for intimacy and wonders why they still feel alone in a room full of people, the emotionally detached loner is operating on a completely different set of standards. And those standards cost something real. Rooms that required a performance the detached loner wouldn't give. Relationships that required a need the detached loner didn't feel. Opportunities that came packaged with a social tax the detached loner refused to pay. The detached loner paid those costs in a different currency. In solitude, in being misunderstood, in being filed under cold and weird and hard to know. And came out the other side of all of it, still intact, still clear, still operating from the inside out instead of the outside in a world that is completely run by people who need the crowd to tell them who they are. The emotionally detached loner already knows, and has known for a long time, that is not damage. That is the rarest thing a person can be. And the people who dismissed it, who wrote it off as coldness and called it a flaw, will spend years living with the quiet, creeping, completely private realization that they had no idea what they were dealing with, right up until the moment it was already over. Here is what happens to people who spend enough time around the emotionally detached loner, or who study them, or who lose them, or who watch them move through the world. while everyone else scrambles and spirals and burns energy on things that never mattered. They start wanting what the detached loner has. Not the loneliness, not the distance, not the reputation for being cold, but the thing underneath all of that. The stillness. The ability to sit in a room full of noise and not be moved by any of it. The ability to care about the right things deeply and feel almost nothing about everything else. The ability to walk away from what doesn't serve them without needing a dramatic reason, without needing permission, without needing the other person to understand or agree or validate the decision. That is not coldness. That is the most functional relationship with emotion a human being can have. And society has been selling the opposite for so long that most people don't even recognize it as health. They were taught that needing people constantly is love, that reacting to everything is passion, that being available to everyone at all times is generosity. And what that teaching actually produced is a generation of people who are emotionally exhausted, chronically anxious, completely dependent on external circumstances to feel okay about themselves. People who cannot sit alone for 30 minutes without reaching for something to fill the silence. People who make decisions based on fear of losing people who were never worth keeping. People who stay in rooms that drain them because the cost of leaving feels higher than the cost of staying. And then they encounter the emotionally detached loner. And something shifts, because for the first time, they are seeing what it looks like to not be run by feelings, to feel things fully, without being controlled by them, to love people genuinely, without needing those people to complete something, to exist in a relationship without losing the self that existed before the relationship. That is healthy detachment, not the absence of feeling, the mastery of it. And once someone sees it clearly, really sees it, they stop pitying the emotionally detached loner and start taking notes. If this video names something real, something about the emotionally detached loner that nobody has ever said directly, drop it in the comments. Just the one thing that hit. And if there is an emotionally detached loner in someone's life, someone who has been written off as cold, as distant, as too hard to read, send this to them. No explanation needed. They'll understand.